box has a brand new pack of cards. Let's see what's inside.
Long time no see. It's been a while since I did a pack opening. I've got a new face here today, so you want to introduce yourself?
Not really.
He's the Reigns of Castamere resident expert, my friend Zach. Today, Zach and I are going to be doing a pack opening, True Steel. We see Barristan Selmy on the front of it, so we're guessing he's going to be in it, but we have not looked over this pack at all. I also saw Alysanne Mormont. Any characters with intrigue icons are definitely going to show up on Zach's radar. We can just record the whole thing and just edit wherever we want, honestly.
Sounds good.
As you can probably...
Ooh, I like this first one.
How'd you do that so fast?
Wait, we have different packs.
I'm going to edit it so it looks like I opened it first. Catch up, bro. Zach can't open packs for shit.
We have a different pack?
Okay, wait. Where's Alysanne Mormont?
Isn't this a different pack as this one?
What? So first up, we have Septimore Dane.
Intrigue only, exactly what you want.
Intrigue only. Our Reigns expert's gonna love that. And 3 cost, 3 strength, not bad. Although if you can't match that ratio as a Monogon, that's pretty bad.
So I'll be honest, I like this a lot, especially with the early game Sansa that has 4 strength.
You're talking about the one that gets
loses strength and then gets insight.
I see. So +2 and renown. Yeah, on a cheap Sansa,
Very cheap 2 cost Sansa. For 5, you get a 6 cost beater.
For 5, you get a 6 cost beater, and then you have her for intrigue. Sansa has intrigue and power, right? So she'd be a beast at power, and that is cheap. And Arya gets immune to opponent's plot effects. I mean, that's just really solid. That will save her from a board wipe. That's just good.
I'd like you all to note the trait.
The 7.
The 7. If you were running a sneaky starry sept or the Faith's Decree, this would be the perfect body.
The Faith's Decree is one of the best 0 costs in the game if you have the ability to play it. The Starks have more of the 7 cards, I would say. Maybe Tyrells are in second than any other faction. But there's a lot of Tully 7 cards because their strategies are very synergistic. Overall, I'd say pretty solid card, and lore-wise, I really like it that she has a different effect for Sansa and Arya. She's like Mr. Lewin.
It's a good one. All right, second card.
So this is a great classic attachment troll. I mean, this is just a great card, honestly, and it's really different than anything that the Starks can do. It just gives them a huge tool. It's a 4 cost. It's just an attachment or just steal your opponent's dude. It's like a snatch steal. It has to be printing cost 4 or lower, so there's no way you're getting econ advantage off of this in terms of numbers.
I think the Stark part allows you to preserve most of your strategies, so you can use I think it's Gates of Winterfell. You can
That's
use
true.
Gate,
a lot of Mormonts.
because it retains the affiliation, but ultimately it's just a counterplay card. Unique characters too, which is pretty broken.
Yeah.
Take a Queen of Thorns.
You can't take a dragon or an army, but they're not going to be 4 or lower, so that's not a problem.
You can take the baby.
You couldn't take the baby because
four
they have
cards.
no attachments though. Just last comment of this and the wall, it's just really good the fact that they change affiliation, especially for the Starks as you mentioned. Oh yes.
All right, moving on from our first set of
Butter
Starks.
bums. So it's a fool, and fools all have this gimmick of insight with some twist that fucks you over, right?
I'll be honest, I'm just not sold on Fools as a whole. I feel like I would lose this more than I would win it and be forced to discard.
I mean, let's be honest here. Discarding a random card is one of the worst costs possible.
If you got to choose,
if you got to choose, it would not be that bad. Drawing a card is less advantage than discarding a random card is disadvantage.
Especially if you're holding the things you need, like high cost, kings or lords.
I mean, cheap insight is cool because insight is maybe the best keyword. It's one of them. It may be intimidate. It's hard to say. If you're playing a deck of fools, you're gonna have no idea what your hand is at any given time. So it'd be fun. I plan to do it.
Next card I am actually not a fan of, simply because it nils your faction card.
It may be 0 cost, but that's still a high cost to pay.
For me, 4 cards and just adding it's not big enough to kneel your faction card, considering how many other searchers there are for the top, X cards of your deck.
An interesting thing about this card is that you also add it to your opponent's hand, right? You theoretically gain some information. There are a lot of cards, mostly Baratheons, but there's also a version of the Iron Throne, or the Faith's Decree, right? If you get to pick your opponent, you could be I'm going to give them their best card, but now that I know they have it in their hand, I have something that can stop them from playing it. I would definitely only use this and pay this kneel that faction card if I could get both sides of this to work for me in a situation like that.
For sure.
Oh, Swarm Brother, one of my absolute favorite cards. So he is a builder, first of all, very searchable, non-unique 2 costs. It's not hard to get several of these guys out.
No attachments, so you're not getting milked.
No attachments except weapon, yeah, so he's not getting milk. Reduce the cost of the first location you martial each round by 1. I compare him a lot to the card Builder at the Wall, whose 1 cost, he kneels himself to reduce the cost of the next Night's Watch location or attachment you marshal by 1. So his advantage is that he's 1 cheaper and that he can do attachments, but his disadvantages are that he has to kneel himself and it's only Night's Watch stuff. The fact that this guy can reduce any location, and it's not just 1. If you have multiple of these guys, you can play almost any location for free. Neutral locations like King's Landing can be made a lot cheaper, which is really helpful, especially in a Night's Watch builder deck that focuses on locations. If you're running 3 of these guys, you probably have a lot of locations, so why not run King's Landing for that cycling? There are weapons, econ weapons, like Miner's Pick, that are made for him, and just having a passive to try and stop it with King of the North.
This is your bread and butter.
For fresh recruits, that forces you to run 1 of each type. Typically, I have on my non-builder deck, when I have to splash in like a builder, this guy always makes a cut. Maybe
now,
vet builder.
I don't know this next card very well, simply because I'm not that familiar with the Old Bear.
It's always the 61st card in my deck that I cut.
The Old Bear is Raven. Stealth, and if it's the Old Bear, they gain Intrigue. The Raven card.
I'm going to point out, it's a Raven card, so Raven support, aka Chet, is able to fetch this, I guess, and it's not even terminal, so I don't know why it would be in your discard. The point of this is to use with the original Old Bear, who doesn't kneel when you have the wall. The only icon he's missing is Intrigue, so if you give him this, there is no way your opponent can get an unopposed challenge. They can win, but they can't get an unopposed challenge. You can kneel the wall for 2 power.
I really like this then.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about that, but at the point, those are your win conditions, and this just enhances them, you know.
The Raven support is itself a mess, but like this is just a very specific attachment, and it's 2 costs. I mean, if you have the Old Bear and you're turboing him out, that's great. Now, there are 2 other versions of the Old Bear, and all 3 of them both have the boring icons military power. So this will work on all 3, and none of them have stealth, I believe.
To be fair, you could put it on, another card. It doesn't have to be the Old Bear.
That's true. I mean,
maybe a Jon Snow. But
for
2 costs, that's pretty expensive.
Jon Snow is stealth. You can see why they made it, because it really does make the Old Bear unstoppable. And in my core set meta against my friend Joe, before we knew the rules, this card was like an ace or some shit, but it sucks now. Well, we got B-Selms! Sir Barristan Selmy, and if there is one thing this man is not lacking, it is traits. He's got Kingsguard, okay? That means right off the bat you can put him in any the white book deck. He's very expensive, and he has a weird ability that doesn't really support other Kingsguard, but that's okay. Got a good body. He's a knight, so you can do a million things with him with a bunch of Tyrell support. There's a bunch of other Baratheon knights. There's at least two, maybe 3 knight supporting plot cards, and he's a small council member, so if you really want to, you can use the only small council support card, the council consents, a 1-cost neutral event to stand.
You could use Stannis, which reduces the cost of the first small council.
There's no Stannis that has that ability. No, there's just a Stannis that is on the small council. The small council, clearly, you can tell when they started the game, they wanted to make this an archetype. It's so funny that there's still 2 support cards for it. Only 1 really, but one that equips and makes someone small council. It's just like, you couldn't possibly use that event because they never followed through on it, but it's worth noting. But really, okay, let's talk about this guy seriously, because he's a 7-cost, and in the Baratheons, which have a lot of big, beefy beaters, there's going to be competition to fit in that 7-cost. So he's got the stats for it for sure. His icons are kind of dull. He's got Renown. And then you were talking to me about his effect earlier. But
it's an interrupt, and it requires you to stand him, which means you have to have a kneel condition. The other real Kingsguard and Knights are in Tyrell. So I'm thinking, you could use this as your condition for Lady Sansa's Rose or something like that. Just a body with, 6 strength, Renown. Like, I'd be using this guy to win those solo challenges.
It's niche, and for a 7-cost, you can't be niche. I think this guy's good. And I think it really is an interesting fact that standing him is obviously, you'd rather do that than kneel something. So it seems like it's a good thing, and it is. Like, if you pull it off, you actually get 2 good things. You get a standing B-Selms, and you get a living Lord. But it's hard to do that, because you have to kneel them first, and you will always telegraph if that's happened.
So I have 2 thoughts, which is, the reason I do like this card is that most cards, to save another thing, sacrifice themselves, which means you can't put power on them. He's a body with Renown, also a Knight, also a Kingsguard. He could be supported by those different traits. So, he can save the power that's on him. The problem is...
Who will save him?
Yeah. Other thing, and hear me out here, you could sky sell him.
Your own Barristan selmy? Okay, yeah, no, I'm down for that, actually. You could sky sell him. Sky sell him would be the actual best way to guarantee before anyone can do anything. Oh, no, but the plot phase would still happen before he get knelt. So your opponent would desperately, after you sky sell your own Barristan selmy, drop their Valor Morgulis to stop you. I think this guy was honestly made more for a white book deck than a Baratheon deck. Baratheons can't afford another 7 cost, and they do have a lot of Lord or Ladies, but your white book deck is going to revolve around protecting your king, who, unless it is his star like mine, will be a Lord or Lady. Now we have City Watch, and watch out, because they're 5 cost or 6 cost to ambush. So if you happen to be holding on to 6 gold, which would, make sense in Lannisters, but for Baratheons that's incredibly suspicious. Oh, it's actually 4 cost as long as you have more power in your faction.
Which is still a lot to telegraph.
It's
5 cost play versus 4 cost telegraph, like.
Still, having an ambush that's cheaper than your printed cost is good, and the stats on this are insane, and that's a pretty easy condition to meet. Honestly, I don't really normally like the more power on your faction card than an opponent, and it is still pretty telegraphed, but I think it's probably the best one with that condition.
Sure.
During the challenges phase, putting a 4 cost thing, not just but permanently, with a 6 strength body, that's insane.
Especially if your opponent thinks they're gonna kneel your Dragonstone Castle.
No, I could really see this happening like second turn maybe. You're going first and your opponent wins, or your opponent's like, am I going to let him win a power challenge? Well, if he kneels that, then I'm just going to win a power challenge. I'll win it back anyway.
Exactly.
They take it. Then all of a sudden you have more power in your faction card. Boom!
You're going to want to play
City,
this.
watch out.
Will this work with marching orders?
It just says what you can't marshal. It doesn't even reference ambushing.
I would do this with a high cost card, just like telegraph you have some extra gold, be like, oh, I couldn't play it. Trade routes, especially if you're playing, a Starry Scepter or a Red Keep.
Yeah, you want it to look innocuous. Man, I just needed as much gold as I could get.
Sir Ilyn Payne.
Sir Ilyn Payne is great.
One
He's
of my
so
favorite
good.
characters
He's
in this
so good.
Stand him with the card that allows you to stand them again and do it again.
I know.
This is like Grey Wind, but even more broken.
And it's a marshalling action, so if you go first, let me tell you a little secret. Every single character your opponent has that's like, Neil Lannisport Merchant to reduce the cost. That's 1 cost, and you can kill it to stifle your opponent's econ before they even get to go. Probably pretty hard to stand him again during the marshalling phase, which is annoying. And it also is really annoying that, his body isn't even that good, but you're never going to get to use it because he's going to be knelt already. For costing 6 and not having traits that make that easier, like Lord or Lady, that's pretty annoying. He is so good, though. Just killing anything with printing cost 3 or lower, that is so great. Your opponent is going to have to play only big characters, and they just can't do that many of those.
I'm a big fan to keep your opponent's board down, especially if you're doing some sort of lock.
Lannies have a lot of high cost choices for sure, and he's hard because he's not a lord.
Now, if I find a card that's better in this pack than this current one, I will be extremely impressed because I think this card is absolutely amazing. We have the Small Council's Chamber. 3 cost Lannister, non-loyal, let me point that out.
Very important.
Immune to events, so your opponent is not going to be able to lay waste this.
Nor
and
will you.
After you win an Intrigue Challenge, which extremely easy for Lannisters. They have everything in their toolkit to be able to do this. The definition faction for Reigns, this card will get
the reigning faction. But Zach,
Tywin.
You can only do 1 Intrigue Challenge per turn. So at best, this will get 1 power per turn. That's not that much. Casterly Rock, yeah, Catnip Jinx. If you're willing to use Relentless Assault and the Spider's Web, that's an easy 4 Intrigue Challenges.
The other thing you could do with this, and I'm musing over this in my head, is to run it with Tyrell and the Honeywine. Seriously, you could be running that, with Casterly Rock, you could get 6 power straight off the bat easily, not counting, an unopposed challenge or anything else you do that turn.
It's a really good card in that Lannisters focus on intrigue, and they have a lot of ways to make that work for them, and this is just bread and butter. It's like, winning intrigue isn't going to win you the game on its own, but hey, if you're getting power every time. I am curious. This is a 3-cost location, which immediately makes me think of myself, Sport of the People, but it says immune to events.
That has to be when it's on the field.
It's not specific, but what do I know? I've seen a couple cards that say immune to events. Stannis, a version of him, also says it, but what does that mean? Pleasure Barge that says immune to card effects. I'm so sure you can still give it away with Mathis Rowan as a cost, because otherwise they just wouldn't have printed it. Comment below if you, the viewer of this channel, knows what that means, and also if you can think of a way to get 15 intrigue challenges in one turn and get the small council chamber OTK.
I will show you how to do it after.
You only got 14 last time, buddy. Dagmar Cleftjaw. Okay, this guy, 7 cost, kind of a, you're like looking through your deck, like what big cards am I going to run? And he kind of is like weird, but he's actually pretty good. He's similar to Mercenaries Chain though, in that he's a high cost, like good effect, insane effect, but you really need to be sure that you can win a challenge attacking alone with him. If you're using something like Jousting
5
Contest,
strength body as well.
with stealth options for sure. He is also Ironborn, which is just an obnoxiously rare trait in the Ironborn.
By the way, this is instead of those things, and this is really the challenge you want to win.
See, I'm trying to think if there's a way to put a card from your hand into your dead pile, you know, like if your opponent used Heads on Spikes, because he's Ironborn, Aeron Damphair can bring him back.
You need your opponent to play Melisandre, the version that kills a character when they select
You need to
it
sneak
from
it
their
into
hand.
their deck, yeah. So he's got renown, honestly,
sold.
just as an obligation because he cost you so much money. Mercenaries Chain is the same cost, and she has a very similar effect, except that instead of taking control of a location, you choose and kill a character. These are both insane. This is unfortunately non-limited, but like 3 cost or lower spans the entire searchable spectrum of my namesake support of the people and House of the Red Door. This is a hard counter to House of the Red Door. That's what it is. Because House of the Red Door cannot be removed. The location can't be removed from the play by card effects. So you just take it, and then it's yours now.
But there are already so many cards that do that in the Greyjoy.
There's not as many
There's
as
the one
you think.
attachment in the things we do for love, like the
Yes,
cost.
that's insane.
Because you're telegraphing this easily. Because he has to attack alone. He only has 5 strength.
I know, he has to not only be alone, he has to be attacking alone. He'll probably have stealth, so I think he's probably better than Mercenaries Chain, but he has a worse ability, and it might not even be able to be triggered. Drown God's Blessing. Okay, so we have the obligatory +1 initiative. This can be the difference in a tie, so like that's helpful.
I think this is an amazing card.
I think it's an okay card. There's some attachments that can only equip to Drown God characters on the field, but there is only one character that buffs Drown Gods. It cannot be chosen as the only target of opponent's events. Such specific wording. So I guess targeted removal. Yeah, I mean that's like put to the sword. So
Yeah,
okay.
like all of these cards that would remove your key piece, I would just throw one of these on there.
But it's just gaining the Drown God trait. If you have 3 Drown God's disciples out, they might all gain like +2, 3 strength. Otherwise, unless you're trying to equip like Driftwood Cudgel, which
No, I mean, it's
is,
really a 1 cost to make them immune to the only target of events.
and
which
give you
is-
initiative. That's not to be.
You know, in other card games, that's not like a trivial effect.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Targaryens.
Jogo, okay, I was checking this card out earlier. He obviously has to do with the 2 different parts of Targaryen synergy, one of which is Blood Riders in Dothraki, and the other is your opponent having a lot of characters in your dead pile. I find the opponent having characters in their dead pile to be such an odd, redundant win condition, because it's like, yo, if they have a lot of characters in the dead pile, like, you're fine, you're doing well.
It depends, because this allows you to safely run board wipes. If you kill 3 characters with
Yeah.
a Valar Morghulis or something, and then you've got a 6-cost body out on the field,
Even if they have 1 dead character, like that's non-negligible.
that makes him 4/4 with
costs,
2
yeah.
2 symbols, which is great as like a profile on its own.
Because they can enter play in the middle of the turn, you might not necessarily telegraph that Jogo has stealth, although your opponent's going to know from the look on your face for sure.
I'll also know how many characters they have in their dead pile.
From the
right?
look on your face. My problem with this card is that the best way to do the get lots of characters in your opponent's dead pile thing is with the dragons and burn them all.
I disagree. See, because the Dothrakis go back to the hand at the end of the turn with some of their cards.
Oh, so you're
which
saying
means
that
they're safe
board
from
wipe. I
wipe.
see. Most of the main deck cards have to do with dragons, have to do with weakening everything, and
It's risky, I
It's
think,
risky, I guess. But he does gain strength, so he won't be killed by your own plot cards. Good for him.
Good point.
Funeral
I've seen
Pyre.
you on this card. I'm a fan of it.
I
The
like
ability to just draw back into your hand, especially if you have some, discard as
I
cost
love
in
this
Targaryens.
card. It's a 0 cost event. You obviously have to nail your faction card, so it's not 0 cost, but like they're being reasonable. They're like, you're doing a hard once per turn, and you're dropping a card from your hand, then you're gaining 3.
3 is a
You're being
lot
killed.
of advantage.
3, well, yeah, it's +2, I guess. The biggest problem with it, it's probably going to happen during the challenges phase, so unless you have other events, it's not exactly immediately accessible card advantage. So you
Definitely.
can try and weigh how much that means to you, but it's an easy trigger condition.
I've
This is
seen
going
a
to
lot
happen
of lords
eventually.
and ladies die in my
I
game.
have seen
and
far
it'd be
too
especially
many.
cheeky if you're running, the Mad King.
Once per turn, you kneel him to kill a lord or lady, and exactly. When you're using annals, if you're just fine with not kneeling your faction card some other way, and you've got a good discard pile in a Targ deck, especially, I'm pretty sure you could get this effect off for free.
Let's see. Moving on to Dorn.
Oh, Tien San. She's
Tien San.
Tears with Lease on a body. She's really good.
She has to win her challenge. Let's,
Yes.
be serious here. 6 cost with 3 strength. That's not great. And it must be intrigue.
I'll say a couple things about her. First of all, she's a bastard and she's a sand snake. She's by far the most expensive sand snake. No, not by far. There's a 5 cost Nymeria, pretty good, but she's the 6 cost. She is the best one in that she has somewhat targeted removal. There's a lot of sand snake support. You can pull her out with no room for grief if the red viper's in your dead pile, but if he's in your dead pile, you've already lost. What's really good about her is that, like, Tears of Lease is a great card, but if their guy has intrigue, you're out of luck. Dorn can remove their intrigue
That's
icon,
exactly what I was
so
saying.
you can basically just kill anything. She doesn't have a lot of strength. If you're running Harmon Uller, you can ambush any amount of sand snakes from your hand for 1 less than their cost, which can actually give her a huge advantage. And then your opponent is kind of in a rock and a hard place too, where if you win, they'll lose a character, and if you lose, you're like, okay, since I lost a challenge, I scry 2 cards.
I'd much prefer to have this in an aggressive Dorn deck. The thing that I'm thinking for is at the Palace of Sorrows, which makes every character strength 3. She's probably going to win that challenge if you're swarming with bodies.
Yeah, but I mean, like, they have a good intrigue defense. By the time you're done removing icons, if you want to get rid of all their intrigue blockers so you can kill literally whatever you want.
The other thing you could do, and this is a shameless plug here, is you could buff them with Tyrell.
Sponsored by Tyrell.
Actually, I think that's the only thing I have to say. You should buff them with Tyrell.
She's a bastard, so she's got some Baratheon support, but really she's got support from the Red Viper who you killed to bring her out with no room for grief. Smart move, buddy.
Classic imprisoned, 1 cost.
Nothing
to say about this card. It's
how are these non-terminal?
Your opponent puts out, their 6 or 7 strength card, thinking they're going to win the military challenge.
Costs
You
them a
just
lot
throw
of
this
gold.
on.
Yeah, be me, right? I've got a couple like really strong cards in my hand, and I'm like, if I get these guys out, my opponent's finished. I play a high gold plot card. He plays pretty low gold plot card. I'm like, what an idiot, he's done. I played Tywin Lannister, Ned Stark, everyone. He plays 3 copies of Imprisoned, 3 copies of Attainted, and 3 copies of I don't know whatever the fuck the other one is called. These are non-terminal and non-unique. These are so good, and they are unique to Dorne. The only bad thing about them is that armies and dragons are safe, but I honestly think that these are so slept on and are the best way of removing icons.
I'm a big fan of this.
Ooh.
1 cost, the Maester's Chain. Now keep in mind, there's already a Maester that, kneels himself to remove a condition attachment, so this is a little bit redundant.
If you're playing the Conclave, then yeah, you can already do that with Crescent.
I mean, I like it, because Milk of the Poppy is brutal.
I don't love this card, but I can see it as a counter pick. I'm particularly befuddled by the fact that this is Maester's Chain, and that's a Maester, and it's a quote from Jon Snow, of all people.
This would be good for Maester Kerwin. It has a very specific attachment to remove milk, but otherwise, I am not sold on this card.
It's also a dominance action, but yeah, if you get to use it more than once, or even once, it was worth it. But for every game that you do, there will be 20 games that you don't. Street of Silk. I can't make this card work. All right, let's review. There's 3 neutral locations that are 1 cost. Yeah, there's 1 for each icon. Shadow Black Lane is for intrigue,
yes.
And Streets of Steel is for military. And what's the third one? Street of the Sisters. This one is none of them, so I don't know why I brought them up. What they all have in common is that they're 1 cost faction kneeler once per turners. So they're basically like, if you're not running an agenda that kneels your faction card, you might want to run one of these because you can afford to do it. Kneeling your faction card is costly, but when you're deck building, if you notice you're not doing it, then yeah, you can get some sweet cards.
Definitely.
This one I've tried to run, however, searching the top 5 cards of your deck is not enough when the card text itself involves you to deck build with 2 different types. The key card that if you're trying to run this is Littlefinger. All incarnations of him are a lord and an ally. Varys is the same way. It's just 5 cards. It's not enough. You might not even see a character.
By the way, compare this to the earlier card we saw, Gift for Arbor Red, which also kneels your faction. This is a 1 cost location. It's much more reliable,
yeah,
with the obvious restriction of it being an ally or companion. But look at the card we saw earlier.
Old Bear's
the Old
Raven.
Bear's Raven, which is a companion.
What? You're right.
You didn't realize you can search out not just companion characters,
Wait
but
a
companion and ally.
minute.
Or,
Card,
the
but-
Old Bear, they're your lord, and now you can search the cards they need to support them.
Okay, that's actually a very interesting point, Zach. However, I will say 5 cards, not enough. And I will
If you're
further
running the-
go,
okay.
it's not only not enough, but it frustrates me because it feels like they thought just because these are nice numbers, it was either 0 or 5 or 10. You know what? For game balance, I think you guys could do 6 or 7, and that would be much more reasonable for a faction dealer. Just saying, if 5 is a nice number, but it doesn't always have to be multiple 5.
All right, moving on. Those are the last of our cards. Now we go on to
Oh, you love
Plot
Forgotten
cards.
Plans.
This
Go
is
for it.
4 gold, 2 initiative, 1 claim, plot deck limit 1. While it is
Plans.
not the plot phase, treat the text box on each revealed non-scheme plot card as if it were blank, except for the traits. Now, this is an obvious range of casting your pick.
Great
You
range
almost
pick.
never want to flip this as your first card because everything that they have will still activate given that this is the plot phase.
I would say the best plot cards in general, and I would even go as far as to say most plot cards that are run are when revealed.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, Zach's totally right. Like, this won't work on board wipes. This won't work on trade routes or calling the banners. This won't work on a bunch of searchers.
I would run this in a Dorn Loyal deck because then you can play a Duran's Name, I think it is, and then flip this afterwards. You know, it would work on something like Peace and Prosperity.
Sure, I always slept on this card because I was like, bad stats for situational and bad ability.
But if not-
But in range, it works for sure.
I saw this card, and I saw it for a very specific, well, 2 very specific use cases. If you need to absolutely save yourself from the King in the North and you can win intrigue, this will work to do so. The North
That's
outside of the plot phase.
incredibly helpful.
It will stop the Prince Who Came Too Late, I think it is, because that's a standing or a dominance action, so you basically totally screw them in the first turn if they play that with the 1 gold.
This card in your plot deck is bad, I think. It's not what you want. But I mean, like, yes, this can absolutely be a game changer if you range it. Close Call, one of my favorite plot cards. Okay.
I never run this card. And
I
it has screwed me
always do.
So many times.
The rule of this game, right, that's like different from other games, I think everyone will agree, amongst others, is the unique element where if a character dies, then you can't play them, they're gone, they're just out of there. There's 2 options to kind of save that for the extra deck, and I always run them because you're running 3 copies of like his star or whoever your favorite character is. If one of them dies, you don't want to brick, and you also don't want to say goodbye to them. You need them probably for your strategy. This is the one that I use more often. This one doesn't give you the card back. It just takes it out of the dead pile and puts it in the discard pile. And then in most cases, you get to draw a card. Not always, though. It's a summer card, so it gets, some support from an agenda, some Tyrell cards, some Detarg cards. You can actually get plus 3 gold on that.
So 5 gold, not bad.
5 gold is good. 5 gold, I think, is good. Any lower, and it has to have, like, really good effect, and any higher, it has to have downside. I think 0 initiative, personally, is bad. Your other option, if you want to, in your plot deck, have a way of getting things out of your dead pile, is to use Ghost of Harrenhal. Now, that's a really cool card because it just puts the top character of each player's dead pile into play. But there's a couple of problems with that. 1, your opponent gets a card. 2, you don't get to pick. It's the top character. Close Call lets you pick. And 3, it only has 2 gold. So I prefer Close Call because I don't want to worry if my character dies that my opponent might kill another character somehow. And then just, if I use Ghost of Harrenhal, I don't have a choice.
I'm not sold, you see. I actually prefer a Ghost of Harrenhal compared to this. The way I would use this is to put a big character out early and know that I'm not gonna, brick with them in my hand the entire game. If I want to throw out a first turn, 6 cost or 7 cost Lord or King or something like that, in which case I want to have that Ghost of Harrenhal for the first turn sack if they're doing something.
I mean, Ghost of
sneaky.
Harrenhal is an option for sure, especially if you just haven't killed anything yet. Ghost of Harrenhal, I definitely used it. I don't think it's strictly worse. I just think this is safer in that it has a very supported trait. It has a very pleasant amount of gold, and you just get to draw a card too. It's just like a very safe, comfortable card.
Counter the Dothraki card we saw earlier, which gains strength based on the characters in your dead pile.
That's true, and you can be counterpicked by Old Nan, who can give anything the winter or summer trait. Okay, well, thank you guys. The channel's been dead for a while, but that's because we've been so busy playing, and you'll definitely see more videos, more pack openings coming soon from Support of the People, and rain or shine. So
Like and subscribe.
Yes. Comment below, like and subscribe. Please explain any of the rulings that we don't understand. And should I have like a leaving catchphrase? Keep supporting the people.
Oh yeah, that's it.